I'm so happy to go back and look more at tower maintenance. It's a topic which I think we could talk about every month, quite frankly, because there's so much. You say, what do you mean? What do you do with tower maintenance? You look at your tower. If it's still standing, you're okay. Not quite. And I'm really happy that Bob Jellison, he's from PPM Telecom, and Bob is going to talk to us about the whole concept of what should be in your maintenance plans and when. So, Bob, let's turn it over to you.
Thank you, Barry. Greetings, everyone. I've been in this industry for 25 years, mostly on the public safety and broadcast side. Uh, been nationwide, many sites, and you'd be surprised what you come across when you're out there installing somebody's antenna system or fixing coax, whatever. It's everybody needs to focus on an inspection of their tower at least yearly. The FDNY does it every quarter, but they're a high profile system that this is what they want. I've had guys climb towers, get up 150 feet in the air, and then find out that one of the supports is rusted all the way through. It's an issue of safety, safety, and safety. Just like you have lights on your tower to warn aircraft flying overhead that your tower is there, you're going to have somebody on that tower one day, fixing your antenna, whatever, and you don't need any issues on that tower where somebody gets injured or worse, killed. So I've been doing inspections with Motorola for many years, and we go over the full gamut of that site. You don't have to be as in depth as they are. They have us inspect the tower, they have us inspect the generator, they have us inspect the shelter, the radios, grounding, you name it. It's a full couple of day inspection to give them what they want. But once you do it, now you have a reference point for your system. You know, even if you're co-located on a tower that's owned by Crown Castle, you want to check your system. You have other crews working on that tower throughout the year, especially if there's cellular on it, that somebody could drop a wrench, dent your coax. There could be anything. For one customer, somebody ran a piece of coax underneath their feed to their antenna, and being as there was no separation, the two coax rubbed, and then they're reporting a leak of their nitrogen. We go over there, we go over the tower, and we find it at the base of the tower that it rubbed through all the way through the outer conductor, and we found our leak. Had to replace 400 feet of coax. It's, you got to make sure you do it. It's going to cost you more in the end if you don't. And then you're going to be scrambling to find somebody to come get you back on the air. Okay, I got a question here from Bill. You find a support that's rusted through, how do you fix it? It all depends on the tower. The section could be removed. A welder could come in and go around it. Everything's handled on a case by case basis for the repair. I was at one site. We were putting up a small microwave dish for a utility, and my guys call me from the site and they're like, "We can't climb this." So I'm like, "Okay, why?" The entire anchor leg split 20 feet in length. So in order to fix it, we had to lift the entire tower off its foundation to get it above the anchor bolts in order to replace that. If it was a leg higher up, you could pull back on it, give yourself a little space, wedge that part of the leg out, and put a new one in. But it's a matter of, you got to make sure your number one asset. I understand you guys, your transmitters, your studio, that's all great. But if you can't get that signal out of that studio into the air, it's useless.
Bob, can I just break in for a half a second? Do you want questions as we go along, or should they hold them?
It doesn't matter. Somebody's got a question, fire it away.
Okay, so we'll let everybody know. Just press your space bar or alternate A to open your microphone, or put it in the chat box, and we'll be watching. Thanks.
Okay, I got one here from Ed. Have I seen the decline in AM tower inspections? Unfortunately, yes. I understand that money's an issue, and I sent Barry some photos if he wants to bring one of them up from Pomona.
All right, you want me to find them, or did you? I've opened the. You can share screen if you want.
Okay, we can do that.
While you're doing that, I'll raise the question. You talk about a yearly inspection. That's not always calling the tower crew in for an inspection. That's making sure you go around all your towers and do your visual inspection, correct?
No, actually, uh, you want to do a physical inspection every year, you know, especially if there's other items that are co-located on that tower.
Yeah, like that incident of the coax rubbing, that's certainly a good reminder.
You see the picture, or
No, looking at you.
you're looking at me? Okay.
There's a little green
Sure.
button at the bottom that says share screen. You click on that and then you select the screen, and then in the lower right corner it says share. There you go.
Okay. So here's a tower in New York, the four bay, four tower array, and it's been there for since the mid 50s, from what I've been told. Zero inspections. This is completely rusted, and it just fell over and leaning on the guy wired to a one of the other station's towers. We have yet to remove this. It's highly dangerous, and the tower owner was like, "Hey, can you just turn around and climb the other tower?" No, I'm not sending any of my guys up on any of those other towers. If this one's rusted and in bad shape, I'm not trusting any of my guys' lives to go look at it. This would be a good way to start with a drone and look at it. I am not a proponent of drone inspections. You can see, but you're not going to get the same results of somebody being on that tower, touching, feeling, tightening bolts, whatever, checking weather seal for water, the whole 9 yards. It's what needs to be done. Here's a video from the site. You can see how bad that tower is. Would you, you got to look at it. Would you want to climb that tower? You know, you got to make sure that it's safe for everybody. You could have 1,000-foot tower and somebody's property's in line within that fall zone. You got to make sure that it's 100%, 100% of the time.
Was that WWRL?
I believe so. That's Pomona, New York.
Hmm.
And also
Yeah, I was thinking it was
here's
more WRKL, right? WWRL is the one closer to Sea Caucus. And this guy's up in New York State line a bit.
Yeah, I just remember one of WWRL's towers came down. I believe Tom Ray knocked it over.
Now, here's a photo of that leg that I had mentioned where we had to lift the entire tower. You know, and from what I understood, they had a crew come out and do an inspection. They missed the weep hole. They didn't make sure that the weep hole was clear so that it could drain, and this is what they got. A $50,000 repair bill.
He's on my head. Poppy, look at that bug. He's pooping on my head. He's pooping on my head.
Okay, George, I'm going to mute you.
Here's another. We got a tower with guy wires. You got to make sure that these guy wires are clear of trees. You can see the actual indentation in the tree from it rubbing back and forth. That that guy wire breaks, good chance that tower's coming down. This was a job where I had to replace this entire anchor. Whoever built the tower put this anchor in a swamp, sat in water all year long. So we ended up putting in a new foundation, a new anchor that sits 3 feet above this one, and then relocated the guy wires and retensioned, and then also at the same tower, his base plate was folded like you put a dent in like a piece of aluminum foil. So we had to dig out and create a new foundation, tie it all together, add a new base plate, weld it, and bolt it in place.
Mr. Jellison,
Yes, sir.
isn't it also true that when I saw that tree one where it was going on the guide wire, that could cause issues with the tension as well?
Yep. Absolutely. You put any additional pressure on that guy wire, you're throwing your tower out of plumb. Here's a prime example. At least this one was on the ground and easy to cut up and remove. But if you don't have this area cleared, that tree falls in a big storm and it's a bigger tree, you might not have a tower in the morning. And it could have been prevented. That's the whole key to these inspections. It's to prevent any issues with your system and knock you off the air.
That's kind of the surprising thing. I mean, how does anybody let their site get to the point that your last picture showed? Doesn't anyone ever go out there and look?
That's it. Most of the engineers I know, do visit their site, but it's from the ground. You can only see so much. You got to have guys up on that tower looking at everything, taking photos, and then like you do it once a year, you have that report from the year prior. Now you can see, okay, my tension's changed a little bit, or the paint's getting horrible. We're gonna have to schedule a crew to come out and repaint the tower, or even when you have guys go out and do your inspection, if you're still using incandescent lighting, they change the bulbs at the same time. It's uptime, uptime, uptime.
When you're relocating a guide wire, I'm assuming you've got to have a temporary guide wire somewhere. What's that look like? What are you anchoring to?
Well, what we did when we relocated the guy wires here at this site in Staten Island, we kept everything attached to the old and relocated one at a time. There was zero wind. So we seized that opportunity to take the pre-measurement of that guy wire, relocate it to the new anchor point, and verify that the tension matches what it was when we just before we moved it. It was almost a day to do it, but as long as you do it one at a time, it can be done without having to put in a temporary. And I still do it the old school way with an analog tensionometer.
How far off do you get to see tensions when you come along?
What was that?
How far off of proper do you see the tensions?
For the most part, if the anchors are done this way, where everything's tied off, you're not going to see much of a movement unless it's a rust issue or a tree issue along those lines. And this is how we did it, using a come along. And this is Mount Freedom in North Jersey. Like I said, you have all this other equipment on that tower. You may have one antenna system, but if somebody screws up, this is what your system could turn into. Another one where stuff was just dangling. The tower was bought by another company. The guy that owned it retired, would not take anything off that tower. He had paging systems up there. He had two-way radio. And according to him, he's like, nope, we're not, the antenna systems will stay because supposedly the town would give him an issue of installing a new antenna. He was just hoping to reuse it and make some money off of it. And years of neglect, this is what we got. We had to stop the job. The tower owner sent their own crew to fix it. It delayed our project for months. I wouldn't send my guys up this tower. It's not safe. And if you got stuff on a rooftop, you got to get it checked as well. Here's one from the heart of Times Square. The anchors pulled out of the wall. It was leaning over 34th Street. You know, if it was constantly inspected, you know, you would have noticed that the concrete's chipping out or the one of the bolts are loose. This is the horror side of the industry.
Out of curiosity on that site, if you remember, do you think that it was improper? You say the anchor was pulling out. You think it was improperly designed to begin with, and they just built something, or do you think it was properly engineered and it just passed?
Here you can see, you know, again, this is 1515 Broadway, you know, where they did brickwork on this side, and some of this is the original brick. So just over time, you're 53 stories above the street. The wind level up there is pretty intense. And, you know, with 20-foot antennas, going to shake in the wind. So it'll vibrate loose. But it's, again, you know, you guys looking at it, okay, you know, we can see that it's pulling out. You know, put in a new mount, you know, whatever it takes to fix it and bring it up to date and to where everybody who's not going to expect it is safe. You know, if that fell over the side, that would have been on the streets of Manhattan. We would have heard about it on every news channel there is. You know, it's nice to report the news. You don't want to be the one that is being reported on. Anything, anybody else got any questions? Want to see any other photos?
I'm sure that as you go around, you get to see an awful lot of horror cases.
The funny thing is when I have guys that I've worked with for many years. As a matter of fact, the one that manages this site in Manhattan, when he introduces me to people, he goes, when the crap hits the fan, this is the guy you want on that site. You know, I've had it where a 40-foot Rhone tower was hanging off the side of a building in Brooklyn after a major windstorm. We're there that Monday morning in the pouring rain, getting that tower off the side of the building. I I love the idea that I'm the one they want to call, and but this could be prevented. I'd rather prevent it than have to save it.
Well, that's the key, isn't it? As you're saying, a regular inspection. I know of some towers that have been put up for 40, 50 years that have pretty much been left alone all that time. Maybe they'll get a coat of paint once in a while, but even that's a thing that you're not sure about because some of these cut rate painting crews will just paint over the rust.
Yep.
I'm going to take the screen from you for just a second to show something that I have shown before. It's on the website here, and it's sort of thing that this is the question I'm going to ask you is, what do you do in a case like this? Can you see that?
Yeah. Normally, is that matter of fact, that kind of looks like one of the towers we were on in South Jersey that had that issue.
No, that was one from John Heddish.
So I'm just saying, that's what my guys noticed when we're like halfway up the tower. And depending on how bad the rust is, that entire section would need to be replaced. It's also possible that they could take a pipe, cut it in half, wrap it around that leg, and weld it in place. There's plenty of options to fix it, but the point is you don't want to get to that option.
Correct. Find it before you get there. When you send a crew out and they see something like rubbing coaxes or antennas, which are built on top of other antennas or something like that, what do you do? Or I'll enlarge it here, and a lot of guys now have to deal with American Tower or Vertical Bridge. Are you finding these folks to be relatively receptive to reports of tower issues?
Well, that that H tower that I had up on the screen with the coax hanging, that's an American Tower site, and the calls were made, and I wasn't able to get back on that tower for 8 months. So the answer is not really responsive.
So what would you recommend a station engineer to do if he sees something that is
Well, here's the thing. It's all going to depend on what's in your lease. You can have an option in there that, hey, if I have a crew on the tower working on my stuff and find something wrong due to somebody else's issue, that you guys can back charge American Tower for the repair. There's ways to handle it that can get it repaired so much faster. But by calling up American Tower and saying, yeah, somebody's coax is hanging and smashing in the mine in the wind, okay, we'll take note of it, and they'll get to it when they get to it, unfortunately.
This could be a very big problem. Got a note here from, let's see, it's from Clayton Ross. He says, on a serious note, I see this being a major issue. Most of the towers you see that fall or collapse are because of the guide wires and not being inspected. Years of seeing it up, thinking it is good, but Mother Nature and such uncontrolled variables are part of why these inspections are important. Thank you for the education, Bob.
Here from Roland, how useful is the use of a drone? Drones will give you a visual. That's about it. Now, you bring that guy out, he charges you, let's say, $1,000 to do his drone inspection. So now you have some video and some photos. You're not going to have measurements. You're not going to have, let's say you find that your mount is loose. Now you're going to bring in a tower crew anyway to go back up that tower and fix that issue. If you have guys on the tower, it'll get taken care of right then and there if it's something minor. But now you spent $1,000 on your drone, and now you're spending $3,000 on guys to come out to your tower. There's a $4,000 expense compared to having it done once a year.
I remember in our conversations on the phone that you mentioned that you never send a single person out. You always have 2 men on a crew for safety reasons.
That's an OSHA requirement. If something happens to that guy on the tower and he's by himself, he's dead. Nobody there to help him, nobody there to rescue him. It's an OSHA mandate that there be at least 2 competent certified climbers on site at all times, even if it's just to go up and swap a connector. I see a lot of ham operators, doing things on their own. It's great, you're saving yourself money, but once you get caught in a situation, your chances of survival drop real quick.
I'll bet. Chris Ortiz says, what would you recommend for a nonprofit station who doesn't have a big budget for yearly inspections?
Well, with us, I built my reputation in this industry and by being a fair contractor. I've bounced from a couple of places, and I have customers that will follow me wherever I go because I'm reasonable on cost and they get what they are looking for. So the idea is, you can walk up to XYZ tower guy and say, hey, I need this inspected. And he's going to sit there and think, all right, I can make a ton of money on this and charge you 10 grand to go do it. Or you find a guy that's reasonable and say, hey, what can you do this for? We're limited on budget. Okay, I'm happy to work with you.
Our
I'd
good
rather have
our good friend Roland Lindhag mentions here one possibility lower cost is to share mobilization expense with other tower owners in the area. Good to be active with your SPE, but maybe you also would have the opportunity of bringing tower owners together.
And that's something I've done in the past. Hey, I need this adjusted. Okay, well, I'm going to be out on the island next week. If you can hold off while my crew's passing through, they can stop, fix that, and then head on to their site. So I'm not billing you for an entire day. I try to make it reasonable for everybody. If you're happy with the service, and you're happy with the price, you're going to continually call me for other things, or
Exactly.
you're going to refer me to somebody, and it, it's a two-way street. We can make it work great for everybody, or then you have those guys that are out there to like, okay, this is my jackpot for today. I'm not worried about next week's work.
Well, the only problem, of course, if we're an emergency, if a tower is down, well, you don't. But we're talking inspections today as opposed to complete reinstalling a fallen tower. But yeah, if you keep your head up, and I'm hoping that before we're done here, you're going to put a slide up with your contact information, and folks can contact you and perhaps get online and say, "Let me know when you're in our neighborhood next time."
Well, we do operate nationwide. We have a nice selection of subcontractors we can use in other locations. We're based here in the northeast of the U.S., but I've built sites all across this nation. I did a lot of the old Flow TV media flow sites nationwide, put them up and took them down. We're not afraid to travel, whatever we can do to mitigate travel expenses, even if I head out to the site and bring one of my sub crews in, you're going to get the same hands on that, you know, when I'm out there, or one of my guys that are based in my office are out there. I'm not just going to send a guy out that I know by phone and did some work, but I'd rather make sure that I interact with the customer and that they're going to be 100% happy at the end of the day.
Bill asks about replacing a section. Does a crane suspend the sections above? And I think you answered partially. That's one option.
Well, the that one slide I showed with the split leg, I had to lift the entire tower to get it up off the anchor rods. Your anchor rods stick up 2, 3, 4 inches above that plate. There's no way to just wiggle it out. So, but the other options would be to, have a crane pull back on the tower to get that space, then pull that leg out, lower it to the ground by ropes, and then pull a new section up, put it in, and then release that full tension. So, but it's all depends on the situation. I mean, we did one for a fire department on a simple Roan tower where we ended up taking one section, sliding it off to the side, putting the no one on, and then raising that section back up to the top because they wanted to extend the tower another 20 feet. Every situation is different. It's all going to depend on what the field situations are, and it'll be discussed at that moment in time.
Would you ever include in a tower inspection a checking of the match with the antenna for the FM stations?
I've done that with the MTA railroad. They had us do the inspection when we did a sweep test of every antenna system that they used. It could be as simple as going up, doing a physical, taking some notes to, where we verified that the grounding's within 5 ohms, or that the antenna systems are swept and still within spec, to doing foundation radar. It, it can get extremely crazy, but something's got to be done so you have your benchmark.
Well, now you just raised another issue that we hadn't touched on yet, and that is the AM folks who have half their antenna underground.
Yep.
So you're going to check the ground systems for breaks?
And there's ways to do that with test gear. You attach it up, and once you need that baseline So you have something to compare it to. Hey, 10 years ago, my grounding system showed near perfect. 10 years later, now it's got resistance issues. Without a baseline, you're going to get caught short.
So really in the long term here, what you're saying is just like you put insurance on your car or your home or your business, paying for a tower inspection is really insurance.
Exactly.
Anyone
You
else
know,
have questions for Bob?
Here, remember that story 6 months ago where the entire tower was stolen? Had the
I was just going to mention that.
Now, we ended up finding out that, he knew about it all along, but had the owners of the station mandated that there's an inspection, you're not going to hide a tower missing. The guys are going to show up and say, "Where's the tower?" And file that report.
Are you conversant with the situation to know if they've actually installed a tower?
No, I did not follow up on that. I just caught it in the news and caught some follow up.
Because I doubt that they're going to let them run the translator forever without a base station.
But
But yeah,
it was a good story.
Yeah, but you could tell from the pictures that had not been there for quite some time.
Exactly.
Hey Bob, this is Dustin. I got a question for you.
What's up, Dustin?
We put an FM translator on top of a AM tower that obviously had a grounding system, and cut through some of the grounding system in order to lay the transmission line for that FM. I was told that some breakage isn't going to create a huge issue. Though the grounding never did get properly repatched. They just sort of covered up the hole and left it. How much breaking is too much?
Again, it's going to depend on your signal pattern. You'll notice that you're let's say you're allowed 500 watts, and you notice that now you're getting some reflection, or your listening audience calls in and says, "Hey, I used to be able to hear you fine. Now you come in, in splotches."
It's so easy to braze the broken pieces together while the thing is uncovered. I mean, that's
Exactly.
like a 5-minute job, if that.
There's cheap ways to do it. Drilling a couple of holes, putting some, metal around it and bolting it together. The right way would be to CAD weld it together.
Well, he's just talking about the wires, I think, not, it's there's
I
nothing
think-
much there.
Hey, Dustin, were you talking about the radials,
Yeah.
or
the
are you
radio.
talking about grounding?
Yep, just the ones underground. Yep.
But,
I did a
there's-
lot of that.
Now, Motorola, I don't know how many of you are familiar, they have their site requirements. It's called R56. 90% of that refers to grounding and how it's going to interact with every system. And to them, they do not want mechanical grounds. So you have that round thing that attaches to a pipe, and then you put the wire through it and screw it down. That's a mechanical connection. Eventually, it will fail. They want to see electrothermic, catalogs for all the connections. Now, of course, somebody going in there with a sawzall and stealing your copper isn't going to help. And they have made some changes to allow for aluminum wire. But again, this stuff isn't going to work as great as copper.
Would you address the issue of grounding a little more here? We've had a number of folks over the years discuss the fact that a tower should be grounded for FM, or even for AM, there should be a system ground. And yet a lot of folks think that just driving a stake in the ground or using a chemical probe is sufficient. What do you do in terms of measuring or recommending?
They have a meter, and it kind of looks like an amp probe that you put around a wire to measure amperage. Well, this is strictly for grounds. That reading should be 5 ohms or less. So you have one single wire coming off of a tower leg. Is it grounded? Technically, yes. Is it right? No. You're going to measure that resistance, and you're going to be up in the 100, 200, 500 ohm range. Lightning's looking for its quickest point to ground. So if you have a 3-leg tower, you have one lead coming off of each leg that are all connected together with a loop. So now you have your minimal resistance. Ground rod should be no more than 8 feet apart, driven at least 8 feet, 8 feet in length, 8 feet apart, and all tied together, again, with catwalks, not a screw-on clamp.
Of course, depending on your location, if you're up on a mountain, you're looking at rock underneath your tower.
Yeah, they have the chemical options, up on the side of a mountain where it's pure rock. You're going to do whatever you can. In some instances, you're not going to get that perfect ground, but the more you put in and the bigger the ground system you have, the better off you're going to be. Your coax should be grounded like every 75 feet. You don't want that lightning bolt to come in and get to your transmitter. You want to mitigate it outside before it even comes close to the building.
That's the main thing, isn't it? And realistically, when you think of grounding and you think of grounding systems, it's important to realize that over a period of time they deteriorate, whether it be a ground rod or something else, need to be inspected.
Exactly. And again, those results monitored over the years.
And then I'll throw one more thing in, that is that a lot of folks, especially the younger folks, I think, have probably never heard of the conductivity map, which in certain parts of the country, you have almost no conductivity in the ground.
And luckily for us, there's smarter men than me that have figured out how to make that work.
Okay. Any other questions for Bob? I think this is
Yeah, just one more out of curiosity. So we get a qualified and experienced crew in to inspect the tower, and every 5 years or more, tower has to be painted. Is there how can I put it, a lower echelon of people who can come in and paint your tower, assuming somebody wrote a spec, or basically the same people who do an inspection could wind up stuck on a tower for 2 weeks, alternating between red and white paint, or as I said, is there a lesser echelon of tower person who can paint the tower?
There are guys out there that specifically do tower painting. There's guys like me that I focus more on the public safety and broadcast side of the industry. I stay away from cellular. So to answer your question, yeah, there's guys that'll just do lighting. But I offer a well-rounded approach. I can do the antenna system, I can do the tower maintenance, I can do the repair. And like I said before, I look to be reasonable in my pricing, because I want you to call me back and say, hey, you took care of us, we ran into this. And that's how I ended up building my reputation and a following of customers that go wherever I go. Because you got to be fair. And that's the whole key. So if you turn around and said, hey, Bob, I want you to do an inspection. The tower paint looks kind of crap. I'm not going to bill you for three different things. It's going to be one job, and come to an agreement. That's the way I work.
Thanks.
I
Anyone
stay
else?
away from cell towers. the it's a extremely competitive market. 90% of the people that are doing the tower work are strictly cellular based. They're not going to understand the uh, importance of microwave or STL links or broadcast antennas, or even how to do a connector. Everything on the cellular side is, pretty much, they'll give you the jumpers. You're not doing the real RF work as you would on the broadcast side. And you don't need these guys to come out and, you hand them a connector that you want them to replace, and they're looking at you like you have two heads. Hey, what do I do with this? Well, you're a tower company. You should know. They don't. And, that's why I stay away from it, because, I've taken guys that are good and transitioned them into my side of the line of work, and they knew how to do connectors, they knew how to do grounding, they understood, and those are the quality guys that you want on your site.
I think one of the stories that we hear a long time is that the cellular operations operate on speed and cheapness, and they're not really as anxious to get permission ahead of time all the time, or even let other users on a particular tower know what they're doing.
Well, the worst part is, especially if you have an AM system, they're not going to recognize that tower as an AM. We're doing a job for a radio station out on Long Island where we're skirting a 500-foot self-support. So we show up one morning and the gates open and there's a truck in there, and these guys are suited up ready to jump on the tower, not realizing that it's a live AM station. Oh, we're here to fix T-Mobile. Did you even ask anybody? You just show up because T-Mobile said, we have a system down, go out there today. It doesn't work that way on a co-located tower. You got to get your slot scheduled, and AT&T could be building a brand new site on the tower that could delay your repair work for 2 to 3 weeks. So, there's pluses and minuses to everything here in this industry.
I'm going to
I
bring
heard
back go ahead.
I was just going to say, I heard of one instance, I won't name who, but they discovered that a cellular tower guy apparently decided that the FM antenna was in the way, so they moved it without even consulting the owner to a slightly lower spot on the tower.
Yep, I've seen that.
So I'll return to the question again. If you are on a shared tower and it turns out to be one of these big companies, what do you do? There's a way to complain? Do you recommend people call you and you pass on the word, or offer to do the job?
That's one way to, well, the old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if, the station owner calls, the engineer calls, the tower company calls, hey, we have to get this done. We won't be in FCC compliance until we do. You gotta push the law on them in order to get them to move. Their big thing is revenue. They don't want to respond. Take that monthly check, put it into a escrow account, and say, until we get this fixed, your money's sitting here. We're not giving it to you.
You have a son that's a lawyer, don't you?
Yeah. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's what it takes.
Yeah. Well, I've popped this up. If you have another slide you'd rather use,
That's
yeah.
fine.
But if you'd like a quote from Bob, there's the phone number, 201-719-1235. There's an
I'll
email
give you
address.
my direct numbers 484-554-7029. Matter of fact, I'll put it up in the messaging here.
Okay. And PPM Telecom is the website, and you can bring that up if you'd like. So, any final? Go ahead.
You know, you got an issue at 2 a.m. Don't be afraid to not pick up that phone and call me. You know, it's part of the industry, something I've been used to. So, when you're down, my job is to get you back online as soon as possible.
Well, it's good to have resources like that, Bob. And we appreciate your being here with us and giving us this information, showing us the pictures of what can happen. And hopefully everybody will now be observant enough that they won't let it happen. I know that many of the stations I've worked for in the past have not set money aside for a regular inspection. But I know a number of people that have contacted me after talking about this with you and with some others. They're now getting on the bandwagon. They see the benefit of this insurance.
It's a company asset. It should be treated the same as your transmitter. It should be treated the same as your building. You know, you need it to get your signal out.
Exactly. It may be the one major bottleneck if you have two studios and a pair of ways of getting the audio to the transmitter and maybe a spare transmitter. But if you have one tower and one antenna, that's it.
Exactly. Better
Now,
be safe than sorry.
Bob, I sure appreciate your coming on with us today and talking about this. We would love to hear more from you. I know you've written me a little article, which we'll be posting shortly. And if anyone has the desire to get more information from you, well, as you just gave their number out, and we'll have that for them too.
Thanks. Appreciate the time, Barry. Thanks for having me on.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.